No, that's okay. Yeah, so what I wanted to do, and I've run one of these things before on behalf of the company that I work for at the moment, is just to go through some sort of generic observations and tips for young players and not so young players into the whole transition process in particular, but also just seeking out employment with life outside of the military. So you probably detected, if you could just switch on to the next slide, please. That's what I look like. I told you, you're not missing much. But you've probably detected a bit of an accent. So I originate from the UK, obviously. I was officer British Army, and then I transitioned over here in 2004 with my wife, and was ADF until 2012. With background in artillery and army aviation. When I left in 2012, I went into a completely unrelated sort of sector. I was mostly working in the resources sector, which I knew absolutely nothing about, and even more so in managing an IT project, which I knew even less about. So that was an interesting sort of transition period. And then I came into Saab, which is defense prime, which is more in my sort of comfort zone, managing projects. Did a little bit of a switch over to another big American prime a couple of years ago, and have come back. And that actually in itself is a bit of a talking point. Because it's perfectly okay to jump in and out of different jobs, and actually it's absolutely normal, which goes against the grain sometimes with military types, because there tends to be a lot more loyalty and stuff like that, and I certainly felt bad doing it, but you've got to get over that. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Could you go on to the next slide? There's actually a bar on here with all of the buttons, which hides some of it. So I might miss some of the text. But basically, what I'm looking at today, I'm not going to read all of that out. But what I want to do is just give you some of my own observations. Talk for about 20 to 30 minutes. I do tend to waffle on a bit sometimes. But I'd encourage you to jump in if you've got any specific questions, either through the text or just to come off mute and chime in. I don't, if possible, I don't just want it to be me rambling on for 30 minutes. But if that happens, that's fine as well, and we can open it up to questions afterwards. So like I said, I ran a similar activity, it's probably about 24 months ago. Where we pulled in we had about 40 veterans come in at different stages, still in the military, transitioning out, and had already been out of the military for a period of time. And we just ran through some of these slides to talk about shared experiences and how we can identifying some of those challenges and how we can proactively sort of deal with them. So that's basically what I'm going to touch on today, and hopefully it's helpful for you. This is the why, what, where. I think these are important questions, and I just throw it in at the start as things that I found useful when you're going through the transition process, or even after you've transitioned. And I'll come back to these questions, but I just wanted to throw it out there first. Is you've got to really understand, why am I transitioning? What is it I want to do? How much do I need to earn? What can I do to proactively deal with some of the common issues around the transition process? Where do I want to work? And then, not a question, but a statement, you've got to network, because probably 95% of the jobs out there are not achieved through, or are not won through, the normal sort of advertisement process. You've got to be proactive and get out there and find the jobs before they even hit the market. No worries. Next slide, please. Again, a bit texty. I'm not going to talk to all of it, but certainly when I spoke about this and the first time. This was a couple of years ago. It's not so bad now because there's been a lot of work done to try and get over some of the stigma around what a veteran is. But I know there's quite a few people in the veteran community that don't even count themselves as veterans, which is an issue that we need to deal with. So there are numerous definitions, which doesn't really help. But the actual definition that's being used today is anyone that's served one day in the ADF, and that can be regular or reservist. So it's a very open sort of term now. And it's interesting to see, like typically in the past, distant past, people would join the military and that would be it for life. It would be a career, you know, for 20, 30 years, 40 years. Now we've got the new generations of younger people coming through that are more than happy to bounce between different careers. So actually the typical period of service is coming down all the time, and it's about 8 or 9 years at the moment, which typically means that people are still in their 20s or early 30s when they're transitioning out of the military. So they've, you know, more than enough time to take up that second career. And importantly, and this is a particular bugbear of mine, is the perception that everyone that served in the military is in some way damaged by it. Clearly, there are people that have physical, mental health issues that need to be managed, and of course there are systems in place to do that. But the reality is that over 2/3 of people that transition out of defence are doing so on their own terms, and it's not due to medical or disciplinary for disciplinary reasons. So that's important. That's an important message, and an important thing to understand, because some of us, you know, you have to overcome that if you're dealing with employers that don't understand the military. Cool. Thanks, Lou. And just to back up on some of these, what I was just talking about there with some of the separation rates, you got 5,500 or so people transitioning per year. That's probably going to go up. 2/3 of those, over 2/3 of those, are voluntary. So it's important that future employers understand that. Okay, thanks again. Now, a lot of this you would have heard before in terms of, you know, what value veterans offer for employers. There's a few of them that are listed up there, and I've taken these from various studies and things that have been done in Australia and outside of Australia. But we've got a lot of skills, soft skills and hard skills, which we'll touch on in a minute. Unique qualities and experiences, excellent attitudes, highly adaptable, flexible, free thinkers, innovative, and all these great buzzwords. At the end of the day, veterans make highly effective employees. Now, some of these traits are double-edged swords. For example, loyalty. Like I said right at the start there, it's perfectly okay to bounce between jobs. I was personally tearing myself apart when I was looking at moving from Saab into the other company, Raytheon, because I was really conflicted about, you know, Saab was a great employer, and I was moving with another project into another company, and I had sleepless nights about that because I felt guilty about it. That maybe that's just me, I don't know, but I don't think it is, and I think that's fairly typical of veterans across the three services to feel that way, and it's something that you should really be aware of and understand that it is okay. And typically, veterans that are leaving defence and moving into other employment will often take, you know, 2, 3, or even 4 or more different jobs before they really settle down. And even when you do settle down and you find another more interesting or better paid employment opportunity, it's okay to do that. Hand in your notice once you're happy, you know what you're doing, and to move with whatever's best for you and your family. Okay, thanks, Lou. This is just reiterating a lot of what I've just said. If you've got the time and inclination to look at it, there's a reference at the bottom of the screen there. It's a really good study that was done out of Deloitte in the UK. In fact, it was an old British Army friend of mine that actually ran that. He runs the veteran program in the UK for Deloitte, which is a very major player, very major consultancy. And what they found was you get that increased loyalty, lower sickness and absence rates, which is interesting. I hadn't even really thought about that. They tend to stay for longer, and it's like a robust pipeline and a young workforce that's coming through. So they tended to be promoted more quickly, and they tended to stay with the company for longer, which is obviously improves, on their return on investment. Thanks, Luke. Most of you will have seen this sort of stuff before. I'm not going to reiterate it, but it's there. Lots and lots of soft transferable skills and qualities. That's just a snapshot that you can see there. And these are things that we would take for granted in defence, probably don't even think about it. But, we've all gone through significant leadership training. We've all had hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars spent on us through the training continuum with leadership skills, management skills, and technical skills. And it's about identifying what those are and putting those into management speak. And that's where there's a whole host of organizations that can help you do that. Soldier On is obviously a very good one. And if they don't know how to do it, they'll point you in the direction of somebody that does. So it's just the point of this slide is just understanding, very broadly that everything you've done in Army or Air Force or Navy is relevant. And whether that's regular force or reserve force, it's all relevant. It's just about how you communicate that in a way that's understood by your future employer. Thanks, Lou. And there you go. We talked about the soft skills. When you look at the hard skills, it's all advertised on the defence website, but there's a lot of different trades out there, and some of you will tick several of those boxes. So hard skills is great, and you can easily equate that into a job that you might be targeting. But you might be leaving defence and you might want to do something completely different. So in that sort of case, it might not be so relevant, and you might need to lean on some of those soft skills a bit more. Thanks, Lou. Okay, so this is just a brief discussion on, and this is the world according to Marc, okay? I'm not suggesting that this is the be all and end all, but this is just based on, some of the reading that I've done and my own experience and talking with a lot of different veterans myself. So some of the common challenges with transition, and the first thing is the public perception of veterans, which I was talking about. Now, if you go up to Joe Bloggs in the street and ask them, what they understood about a veteran, they'd probably talk about Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, being away a lot, mental health, some sort of, physical impairment, a real mix of positive and negative things. The military service is generally very highly respected in Australia, and it's interesting coming from the UK, which is slightly different, where they went through a real phase after Iraq of not being held in very high regard in the general public, and it's since picked up. I think in Australia it's been generally a lot higher overall, but there is a high percentage of the public that would believe that service life is damaging in some way, and that's something that we need to be aware of, because you need to address that and tackle that, because if you don't tell them otherwise, a lot of people will be thinking exactly that. So you need to put a really good spin on all of the positive experiences and skills that you've picked up with your military service, so you can actively offset that by educating, the recruiters or, the potential employers at the interview. You've got to do something about it, because if you leave it, the chances are there'll be somebody on that panel that thinks that you're broken in some way, because they don't know any better. They just see what they read in the papers and on the TV. That's potentially, I'm sure some of you would have seen, there's going to be a report released soon about special forces in Afghanistan that's probably not going to be that great. That's another thing that's going to reinforce that perception of military service not being so good. So it's up to us to do something about it instead of just letting it fester. And the other thing is, we just follow orders. We do drill on the square, we paint grass green, and that sort of thing, which clearly isn't the case. We don't just wait to be told what to do. We're perfectly capable of thinking for ourselves. And in fact, the whole point or the whole principle behind military leadership is around encouraging that sort of free thought. So that's another thing that needs to be addressed. The soldier on team will be far better placed to talk about translation of skills and experience into civilian parlance or into civilian speak. That's always a challenge. I found that difficult, and that comes with a bit of practice, but there are lots of people out there to help you with that. So you're best talking to the soldier on team to help out with that sort of thing. But again, something that you need to be careful of, using too many acronyms and military terminology and things like that, because people just will not know what on earth you're talking about. Involuntary discharge. Now, if that happens due to injury or disciplinary or whatever it might be, but not so much on your own terms, then you may not have had a chance to plan adequately for your transition. Or it may even be a voluntary discharge with just some sort of family type issue that's come at short notice and has forced you down a path to leave the military. So you might not get that sort of planning time, because it does take time to get your ducks in a row before you leave. Something that I certainly was impacted by, because I joined the military from a fairly young age, and that's all I knew. Loss of identity, sense of worth, or meaning. I didn't really realize it, and obviously until I left, didn't really think about it. But when you have been in for a little while, and I wasn't in for that long, I was just under 20 years or so, but long enough. The military was obviously a big part of my life, and when you leave it, we're all happy to complain about it when we're in, but when you leave it, you really sort of get an appreciation of what it is you've left, and with it comes a real sense of your own identity. Well, that was certainly the case for me. And you go from, I certainly felt like I was, around the barbecue. You could talk about what you did as a career with pride, and people were genuinely interested in what you did, because you did interesting stuff and you went to interesting places. And then you talk about being, in my case, a project manager for an IT project. Well, I was almost ready to stab myself in my eyes, because I was boring myself at times. And it's just one of those things, it's just one of those personal things that I felt I had to get over, was that sort of sense of worth, and that you're achieving something meaningful. That took a while for me to sort of understand that and manage that. And that'll be case by case, obviously. Some people won't struggle with that at all. Other people might. There's just down the right-hand side there, unemployment, underemployment, or misemployment. Just be careful that you try and pick your employment on your own terms, and you understand what it is you're looking for. Unemployment obviously speaks for itself. Underemployment if you're a casual worker, and misemployment, often it can be worse to go into a job that you're not suited for, that you don't enjoy, as opposed to not being in a job at all. It can actually be quite damaging. and I found that a little bit in my first job when I first left the military. Loss of status, responsibility, and starting all over again causes all sorts of anxiety sometimes, depending on the individual. Cultural differences, probably don't need to explain that too much. There's clearly, the military has its own very unique cultural aspects, and you don't always get that in anything like that in a civilian workplace. So you've got to be very careful that you don't try and take all of that and expect it to translate straight into where you're going, because some people will be intimidated by that. And you know, it's not always appropriate. So be prepared for woolly decision-making processes, lots of collaboration, and often people not willing to step up and make decisions as quickly as you might like them to do, as you'd be used to in the military. It does take a while to get used to that. Now, the final thing I'll touch on here is often when you're applying for jobs, they often ask for a minimum period of time in a certain industry. Now, there's no easy way around this. You know, often, you know, if you're applying for, you know, project management job, say, you know, they'll ask for, you know, 5 to 10 years of project management in the resources industry. Well, obviously, if you just come out of the military, you can't actually satisfy that. So you've got to think of interesting way, or, you know, novel ways of, I guess, addressing what it is they're actually asking for without being able to provide the specific experience in the industry. That's something that we're trying to deal with from inside industry as well, and trying to encourage human resources teams and those sorts of groups to take those out, because it does put off or prevent a lot of people that are transitioning out of military from even applying for the job, because they don't meet that specific requirement. So that's a bit of an education thing on the industry side, I guess, but it's something that you should be aware of. I just recommend that book as well. I found it useful. Tribe by Sebastian Junger. It talks about the whole tribal aspects of the military and how that doesn't necessarily carry across into the civilian street. I found that quite useful to try and, I guess, get a better understanding of why I was struggling with certain things. It's quite an easy read. Thanks, Lou. Okay, so that's all kind of problems. So what can you do about it? The skills translation, I think I've already mentioned, whilst you're in, and actually you can do it when you're out as well. Try and convert as many of your military qualifications into civilian qualifications. Defence is getting better at doing that now. I certainly did that when I was still in, with Cert 4s and diplomas and things like that. So try and get that done early, and so that you've got those easily and readily recognised qualifications on your CV. Get that guidance from the ADF transition centres and ex-service organisations like Soldier On, and really importantly from other veterans as well. Like I said, I've spoken personally to, you know, any number of individuals over the last few years, and even if they just pick up one thing that might help them, then it just makes that, you know, 30 minutes over a coffee worthwhile. And there are some tools available on the web through Defence, DVA, the ex-service organisations. There are a lot of companies like Saab and Raytheon and Boeing, and, you know, particularly defence primes. New South Wales state government springs to mind. They've all got tools that are available on the web to help you convert military skills and qualifications into civilian speak, and other advice. So Google away. You'll be surprised at what you can find out there. It's really important, if you're able to start planning for your transition early. I know, you know, a lot of diggers that, you know, that were working for me, or in the same unit, you know, you'd often see people like crack the shit sometimes and then just throw in their discharge. not really mapping out what they're going to do with life after the army, in my case. So you've really got to put the effort in. I think, there is no ready solution for everyone that's leaving defence. You have to make your own luck, and you have to really map this out, because it's not just going to be handed to you on a plate. Again, this is based on a personal experience with self-doubt. I think you need to be prepared to address self-doubt on your decision to leave. I certainly did. I got to the point where, things weren't quite going as I hoped they would. And then you start thinking, have I done the right thing? Should I rejoin the military, which obviously is an option, and is probably even easier now than it ever has been. That's something you need to address. And I think one of the questions that I threw up there at the start is, okay, why am I leaving? So if you really understand that, and you say, well, I am leaving, in my case, it was for family issues. I am leaving because it's the best thing for my family. So when you get that self-doubt, and you're feeling anxious about, your career's not going the way you thought it would be safer and easier to go back in the military. Well, is that really addressing the problem? Why did I leave in the first place? So that's something that took me a while to get my head around. I did have self-doubt, and that's perfectly, I think, the main thing to understand, that is perfectly normal. And in fact, it's probably to be expected, unless you're really lucky and you just land on your feet and you go straight into your perfect job, which not many people do. So just be prepared to address that. And I think the best way to do that is to remind yourself about why you left in the first place. That's not to say that going back into the military isn't the right thing. It might be, but that's a decision only you can make. Be realistic with your pay expectations. I've seen both ends of the scale here, where people massively overinflate what they think they're worth, and they think they're going to walk straight out into a 200k, 300k job, which could happen theoretically, but it's probably not going to happen unless you've got friends in high places. But at the same end, you've got to don't underestimate what you're worth as well. You've really got to think hard about what it is you think you're worth, what it is you need, and then there's probably somewhere in between is probably where you're going to end up. The hardest, and I still don't enjoy it now, the hardest question to answer for me, certainly, and I know for a lot of other people in the interview, is, so what are you looking for a package? And I always feel dirty when I answer that question, because none of us really, like to put a number on what we're worth. And you think, well, I don't want to go too high because I don't want to price myself out of it. I don't want to go too low because I need this much. So it's about finding that sort of band that you're happy to work in. And I would always encourage you to go to the top of that band. And then if you need to, you can negotiate some middle ground. Don't go straight to the middle of the band, because whatever number you throw up first is going to be the number that they run with. Whether they stick with it or go below it, they're not going to go above it. I've tried that, where I put in a number that was too low and then I tried to up it. Nah, don't even bother. Okay. Engaging with other veterans, important. Volunteering and things, I'll come on to that in a minute, to help maintain that sort of identity and belonging. And think carefully about accepting whatever it is that you're thinking of going into, as it may not be the right fit. Now, there may be, a situation where you have to take a job for whatever reason, and that's fine. But if you're able to think about it carefully, and if you're not sure, the chances are it's probably not right. If there's doubt, there's probably no doubt. So think carefully, because if you go into the wrong job, and it can actually be quite damaging. Okay, I can't quite see the bottom ones there. You're probably going to have to learn quite a bit. We know that, so be prepared for that. And like I said, don't undervalue yourself. Okay, thanks, Lou. Lots of words. Basically, it boils down to don't write off the reserves. You might be leaving the army. You might not ever want to. Oh, sorry, the military. I keep reverting to army. It's what I know. And you might never want to have a bar of it again, and that's okay. But the reserves is actually a really good safety net. I've actually just rejoined the reserves just this year, largely because of all the uncertainty around COVID-19, to be honest, and because my work gives a decent sort of package for supporting reserve time. So it's a good safety net. If things don't quite work out, you can always do some reserve time whilst you're looking for another position. And also, there are some employers, and I'm with one of them, where they will actually actively support you during reserve time. So, for example, you could potentially get 2 weeks of paid reserve leave where you're getting your salary at work and you're getting the tax-free pay out of Defence Reserves as well. So don't write it off. Doesn't work for everyone, but it's something to consider. Thanks, Lou. Volunteering, something I did for a while. It kind of worked for me when we were talking about, the whole transition, sense of worth and identity and everything else. I worked at the Hutt Street Centre in Adelaide, homeless shelter, just doing, random menial tasks around the place, helping out with breakfasts and laundry and stuff like that. Really interesting to get that, even if you're feeling a bit sorry for yourself sometimes, it's pretty safe to say there's always somebody a bit worse off than you. So sometimes, I felt I just had to be thankful for what I had. And other than that, I just found it really good for my own sort of self-esteem and just how I felt about myself to continue contributing back to the community in some way. So yeah, and some of these things, apart from, supporting networking and everything else, it always looks good when you're applying for jobs to say, well, in between jobs or, in addition to the work that I've been doing, paid work that I've been doing, I'm also volunteering in this particular area. Thanks, Lou. So some of the myths, I think it's useful to be aware of some of the sort of perceptions that are out there. We're not all mad, sad or bad because we've been in defence. Again, that's what some people think. In fact, quite the opposite. We are enriched for having served in the military, noting that obviously some people do come away with, issues that need to be managed. We have a massively broad range of transferable skills, and that's something that we have to be ready to translate and communicate through, the whole recruiting process. We are innovative self-starters, not waiting to be told what to do. We're not all old and tired, although most times I am at the moment. We're not charity cases. We are diverse and inclusive, and at the end of the day, we will make you money. All very positive messaging, and that is what I'm trying to do from the inside to help educate employers, potential employers of veterans, that we provide all of this stuff. Thanks, Lou. Okay, so in terms of, this is a prep for pathways sort of activity, and hopefully some of you, if you haven't already, will go on and do pathways events with Soldier On or similar activities through other organisations. I've been to pathways events with the employer, so listening to veterans, talking to us about what they think they might be able to do. and I've seen good and not so good, but that's okay. It's all good practice. Excuse me. So my advice, when you sort of plan for these sorts of activities is, you need to have an elevator pitch. You need to rehearse what you're going to say. You need to plan it, try and tailor it for different employers. So do a bit of homework, practice it, and then deliver it with confidence. So link to that. Do your homework, research, find out who the potential employers are going to, or which potential employers are going to attend. Do your research, find out which ones you want to target. You might not, there's no point just talking to an employer that you're not going to want to work for. Tailor your pitch to them if you can. Tell your story, your whole story, but make sure it's the short version. They haven't got time or the interest, to be honest, to listen to your whole life story. So you need to make it succinct and speak with a level of confidence. Whatever you do, and I've seen this happen, don't badmouth anyone. It's a small town, especially Adelaide, but it's a small country in that sense as well. Everybody knows everybody. So I've seen individuals badmouthing their previous employers, and that, well, chances are, we might be working with that previous employer, and before you know it, somebody's mentioned something and you've got a bad rep. It's totally okay when you go to these things to ask the employers for advice and tips. In fact, I think they would look on that very favorably. That's the whole point of these things. So don't be afraid to ask for that. And also ask them if they don't offer it for a business card or contact details. And if there is some common ground or something you want to follow up on, then make sure you follow up with them after the event, unless they beat you to it. Don't wait for them to do it. Depending on the size of the company, they might be dealing with hundreds of different, potential employees. So if you follow up with a very courteous, succinct, and sort of tailored response, then that will increase your chances of, getting in front of them again. Okay, so these are we're sort of almost at the end of my spiel. I think these are the most important questions, certainly were for me, with a statement at the end. So once again, if you're in the process of transitioning, or if you've transitioned, or even if you're just thinking of transitioning, you think, well, why am I leaving? Why am I leaving the military? Is it because I'm bored? Is it because I don't want to travel as much? Is it because of family reasons, as it was for myself? Why am I transitioning? And then as and when, well, first of all, it gives you that confidence that you are actually doing the right thing. And secondly, if you do get that self-doubt later down the track, you can sort of think back to why I'm transitioning and know that, you are actually doing the right thing, and you're not just going to necessarily bounce back into defense for the wrong reasons. You can bounce back into defense for the right reasons. That's totally encouraged, but make sure they are the right reasons. What do I want to do? This is really important. Sounds obvious, but what do I want to do? What skills do I need to pick up on if I don't have them already? And then from when you work out what you want to do, you can work out, and it's linked to one of the other questions here. Where do I want to work, both physically, like in Australia, outside Australia, in South Australia, New South Wales, whatever else, and then where do I want to work in terms of what companies do I want to target? Who's got good cultures? Who's got good pay? Who's got good leave, or whatever it is? Who's got good career progression opportunities? These are all questions that you need to research, ask yourself and research. What do I need to earn? First of all, don't underestimate what you're earning in defence. when you add it all up, salary is just one thing. You won't match the super that you get in defence anywhere else. The super package in defence is astonishingly good. Trust me, you won't even get close outside of defence. So you need to think about, obviously, your salary, because that's what you take home every couple of weeks. Your super, your leave, your medical. If you're getting private healthcare outside of the military, it costs a fortune if you're not doing it already. It's a constant drain. There are all these extra things that you need to consider before you leave, and that will help you work out what it is you need to earn, because you do have to pay for more when you leave the military. We've been through some of the what can I do to offset the common issues. I've kind of spoken about a bit of that. We don't need to go through it again, but you need to sort of think about what these issues are by talking to ESOs and other veterans, which will help you sort of get over them before they become an issue. And I've already talked about where do I want to work. That's kind of linked to what do I want to do. And then the last one is network. Now, I know everyone talks about networking and how important it is, but that's because it is. I've only ever applied for one job through a Seek or anything like that. And I was successful in that job, but the reality is that a lot of these jobs that are advertised, they kind of already know who they want to employ. They have to go through the process a lot of the time. That's quite a cynical way of looking at it, but it's kind of the truth. Having said that, there are a lot of companies out there that have signed up that are pledge partners with Soldier On, and there are other equivalent type schemes that are out there that will actively work towards employing veterans, and they do advertise themselves as doing that. So have a look around who the pledge partners are, and there are other schemes out there as well. See who's advertising themselves as veteran friendly, if you like. And they're not all in the defence industry at all. There's all sorts of different companies that do that now. And if some of them, and I know Saab's one of them, if you meet the requirements, then you'll get an interview. And getting the interview, to be honest, is the hardest thing. You just got to get your foot in the door. You've got to get through that HR barrier and then get an opportunity to sell yourself. And then obviously it's down to how well you present in the interview. So networking is really important. Using these sorts of organizations, using people like me or anyone else, I'm nothing special, but using people that are in the sorts of areas that you want to work already, that's how you start to get your name out there, and getting your name in front of HR or through the different recruiters, and trying to sort of identify where those jobs are before they're even advertised. Because if you're waiting for everything to be advertised, it's an uphill struggle. You need to get that job before it's even put out there. That's what's happened with all but one of the jobs that I've had since I've left the Army. They weren't even advertised. Okay, and I think that's it. I've kind of rambled on a bit.
Thank you,
and I know
Marc.
I've got a very monotonous voice, but I'll just throw it out there again. You can hit me up on LinkedIn is one of the tools that you can use. You can hit me up on that, or through Soldier On. They'll give you my contact details. If you're interested in talking about anything offline, or if you want to catch up or anything. Yeah, more than happy to help. And that's all right. I was just going to say, if anyone had any specific questions now, I'm happy to have a yarn about that too.
I'm going to stop sharing